Happy Thursday to everyone. I hope that you are looking forward to the weekend like I am. This is a weekend that is very near and dear to my heart as a Christian and celebrating Easter. Like I said on my broadcast yesterday, if you've heard about Easter or heard about the resurrection of Jesus and you're not quite sure what that is and you want someone to talk to, I'd love to talk to you. So shoot me a Facebook message and we'll get on the phone. If there are questions that you have that I can't answer, I'll be sure and direct you to the right person. Speaking of the right person, hey, Dan, there's our buddy Dan, Garrett. That's nice. The guy that like knows everybody. It seems like no matter who I meet, they somehow know Dan McCoy. So Dan, great job being a connector and knowing everybody. I really appreciate who you are. And there's Stacy. Great to see you, girl. This is a woman who is moving and grooving and taking massive action to change her life. So Stace, I'm super proud of you. So all of you know this guy sitting here with me, Garrett Gunderson. He is the owner of The Wealth Factory. Garrett has become a friend of mine as well as a mentor. And I just want to say, if you haven't been to a Wealth Factory workshop yet, you are really missing out. So I'm hoping that we'll be able to pop in some links, Garrett, at some point, and individuals can check out the Wealth Factory. Right now, you can go to wealthfactory.com and see all that's going on. I also encourage you to make sure on your Audible account, you have Killing Sacred Cows. I have Garrett playing in my ears all of the time. And I especially love how fast you talk and how passionate you are, because like, I just like really track with it. And man, I get going when I'm listening to you. So what is the word you call it? It's like passion and angry.
Yeah, I stole that. I stole it because I once heard David Jackson said he was passionate and pissed. So he's just going to call it passionate. So just merge those together, because I'm not really angry like overall, but I do get frustrated with all the misinformation around finance because it costs people so much of their livelihood. It increases stress, and people are selling complexity because then it becomes they're reliant on these individuals and institutions, and the institutions play by one rules and they teach a totally different set of rules. And so I just think that instead of being used by them, we should learn how to utilize them. And that's a big difference, and simplify everything so that people can actually enjoy life along the way. But money is lifestyle. And if we don't figure it out, lifestyle is impacted. So, it's just something that whether you want to deal with it or not, you've got to deal with it, because if you don't, it's going to consistently be a crutch along the way.
Yeah. And, I love that in Killing Sacred Cows. So if you don't know, it's really Garrett going through the myths that have been perpetuated on all of us about money, that when you listen to him go through them, it's like, oh yeah, that doesn't make sense at all. And it's kind of like, I see it as like medicine, right? Like no one on the planet believes that a magic bullet exists for anything, whether it's relationships or money or health or weight loss or education. Like there isn't one thing that you can do besides death, right? Take, I don't know, arsenic, you're going to die, right? Like that's the magic bullet. And yet the Western medicine paradigm is all based on a magic bullet, right? And yet we as chiropractors feel like it's so difficult for people to understand chiropractic. It's not true. Like that makes more sense to individuals than the magic bullet. So just like in Killing Sacred Cows, Garrett goes through and breaks down, like one of them when I was listening to you the other day that I thought was so funny, like compound interest. Let's start there and then we'll jump into debt, because we had some questions about that. Let's talk for a second about this whole fallacy and where it came from about compound interest.
Well, think about it, like compound interest, people say it's a miracle, and then they misquote Albert Einstein, saying that Einstein calls it the eighth wonder of the world. He didn't call it the eighth wonder of the world. He called compounding numbers the eighth wonder of the world at a conference in Austria. Security National Life in the 1920s misquoted him for their own agenda to get people to hand their money over and just wait. See, compound interest is brilliant for the institutions because it takes 30 years to develop. And so when you finally get there and you find out, hey, wait, this didn't work, the U.S. Department of Labor says that 95% of Americans, when they turn 65, are not able to be economically independent, meaning they can't cover their expenses if they stop working. And ultimately, retirement plans on average are creating $10,000 a year of retirement income. That's a failed financial system that I could relate to compound interest and its kind of framework of accumulation, where we just set money aside, we wait, and then we hope in the long haul it's going to work out. Well, guess what? It's not, because it has this abdicate responsibility. It plays into the agenda of the institutions. It doesn't support our lives. So we've got to shift our focus towards cash flow. We've got to shift our focus towards production. We've got to really shift our focus towards how do we achieve economic independence so that we can swing for the fences in everything we do. We could reinvest back into ourselves without any burden of our active dollars having to pay for our expenses, because we've created enough cash flow from our assets. So I know that's a bit of a mouthful, but ultimately, like, compound interest is something that we've widely accepted as this sacred cow that, ooh, it's a miracle. It's a miracle we bought into it. It is so slow. It is so underperforming, and it has let far too many people down. And ultimately, the reason why it's so prevalent is because institutions get a hold on to your money longer. Institutions don't work on compound interest. They work on cash flow, and they tell you to accumulate. And this is the problem. They're playing by a different set of rules. The game is rigged against us. And ultimately, people are just buying into it, even though the results have been disappointing. It's like Western medicine. You know, like, it kills more people than anything. And yet it's just what people do, because you just go because this is what everyone does. You take this pill just because I watched a stupid commercial that says, oh yeah, my leg's going to fall off if I take it, but I won't have a headache. I mean, it's frustrating to watch all of these agendas out there that don't serve people. They serve the institution, they serve the corporation. And so I think it's time to take the power back. It's time to make personal finance personal again. It's time to consider us our greatest asset, not some stock or bond. And I was thinking the other day, just some of my weird random thoughts is, like, there's a thing called tissue, but most people call tissue Kleenex. Kleenex is the brand of tissue, right? It's not the only tissue. When we hear the word investing, most people think of investing like stocks, like we think of Kleenex and tissue. Stocks is just one type of investing, not the only type of investing. Yet most people rely heavily upon stocks. And I'm just here to make a bold prediction. The stock market's not going to make it in our lifetime. It's becoming less and less relevant. And it's unfortunately not built upon our best interests. And so when people quote that Warren Buffett's a stock market investor, he's not. He's a business buyer. He just has enough money to buy those businesses through the stock market. And so when we just put our money in that for 30 years, we'll be disappointed. So I'm here to make sure people aren't disappointed, that they improve their lives along the way and they learn the rules so they can utilize them versus be used by them.
See why I asked Garrett to do this Facebook Live with me? Like, I've listened to him a bajillion times and my head still just goes, what? Wow. So here's the deal. I'm breaking this down for all of you. You know how when somebody comes into our practice, they're a new practice member and they've had no experience with chiropractic. And we're like, man, if you just understood the principles of chiropractic, if you just understood above, down, inside out, if you just understood all of these things, then your choices would be different. Well, that's the same thing here with finances. Like, it is our duty, our responsibility, and to understand the concepts that Garrett's talking about here. Cash flow. What is cash flow? We talk about it, but is there really and truly an understanding? Or, you know, one of the things I love about what I'm learning at the Wealth Factory and learn from Garrett is, I remember my very first conversation. I think it was with Matt, and I was like, oh, I hate insurance. He's like, oh, tell me about that story. Right. And all it was a story that I had borrowed from, you know, other people, because I really didn't understand it. I just didn't like writing that check every month because I didn't understand the vehicle that insurance can be. So can we talk about, let's like slow down just a little bit and break each of these concepts down. So let's first break down, what do you mean by cash flow? And let's first talk about it, Garrett, in the perspective of the difference between like rules, right? We're saying like business institutions or banking institutions are winning because they have a different set of rules of how they're making money versus how we make money. So there's corporate finance and there's personal finance. So let's start there and then bring it into cash flow.
Okay, so let's begin with the rules. If you're an institution, Barbara, what do you want from people? You're a financial institution. What do you want?
I want their money.
Yeah, how often?
Every day, all the time.
How long do you hold on to it for?
Forever.
And how much do you want to give them back if they want to withdraw?
Ooh, I want to charge them for it because I want to hold their money.
Yeah. So there's the rules of institutions. They want your money on a regular basis, hold on to it for as long as possible, give you back the least possible. So a retirement plan is the very best vehicle for them to do just that. Because now there's restrictions that you can't get to until 59 and a half. They get to take fees off your money and the government's money. And they're going to tell you that when you get to retirement, just live off the interest. Don't ever invade the principal, because the principal is something they're putting to use in cash flowing. So there's the rules. Now let's look at cash flow and break it down. There's two things to consider here. One is most of us are being overly reliant upon a concept of net worth. The net worth is measured on your balance sheet. Your balance sheet, if you draw a box, and then you draw a vertical line separating it into two hemispheres. On the left side, you have assets, and on the right side, you have liabilities. Assets are just simply what do you have and what is it worth if you were to liquidate it. Liabilities are what do you owe now on an ongoing basis because of either that asset or simply because you have a liability without an asset attached to it. And so the difference between your assets and liabilities is called equity or net worth if it's positive. And if it's negative, meaning you have more liabilities than assets, it's called debt. So we had a question that says, is there such thing as good debt? Well, no, there's most people think every time they borrow money, it's debt. That's not true. When you borrow money, it's a loan. Semantics matter because all wealth is built through conversation. If we have the wrong semantics, we have the wrong mindset and we have the wrong results. So debt is when you owe more than you have. You don't want to owe more than you have. That is a debt. When you have more than you owe, that is an equity. You're in equity. You want to have equity. So you're always looking to build equity. But the problem is with accumulation and the rules of the institutions, they have us become over-reliant upon net worth. They want us to only work on accumulating that and growing that net worth. So the more assets we have, but here's my concern. When your assets don't create cash flow, they're merely potential. When your assets are not creating cash flow, they're merely potential. So what is cash flow? We go to a different financial tool for that, known as the income statement. In business, we call it the P&L, standing for profit and loss. It really should be profit or loss because it's our income. If we draw a box again, but this time we have a horizontal line, the top hemisphere, the north hemisphere is income. The south hemisphere is expense. So it's our income versus our expense. And this is how we measure cash flow. What amount of income is coming in on a regular basis minus the expenses? When you have more, that's profit. If you have more expense than income, that's, then that's loss. So a loss temporarily might not be damaging, but debt temporarily might not be damaging, but any of that long-term is going to lead to bankruptcy, or it's going to lead to insolvency, or it's going to be problematic. So now let's combine these two things together, balance sheet and income statement. The balance sheet says, if you look and go, can I get my assets to create more income over time? That's a cash flow mindset, right? That's saying, how do I create recurring revenue so it's coming in now and in the future, not just 30 years from now through compound interest, because compound interest only focuses on the balance sheet and neglects the income statement. It's kind of like a body. Like in your body, if you had really good muscles, that's like your balance sheet. But income statement is like blood. If your blood isn't flowing, you die, right? No matter how big your muscles are, they've got to work together. So I want to teach people, how do you get your balance sheet and your income statement to work together? This is how. You ask and look at all your assets and say, how can I create cash flow with these assets? How do I capitalize on these assets? How do I have these assets benefit me now and in the future? Then you look at your liabilities and say, how do I address these liabilities? Liabilities are not necessarily bad things. When people get in a scarcity mindset, they think, I've got to eliminate all liabilities. But liabilities might be the gateway or access to assets. Liabilities might be the gateway or access to assets. So let's say tomorrow there's a financial firm that goes up for sale. That financial firm, they're selling because they only focused on their net worth. They didn't have enough cash flow. So now they have to drop the price just to liquidate because they're in a cash crunch. See, this is why recession, some people make it a lot of money and a lot of people lose money, because if we only think about net worth and you get in a cash crunch, you've got to lower the price of your sale because you need the money quick, and that destroys your net worth. If you have strong cash flow, you don't have to sell because you have cash flow coming in and you can ride out a tumultuous and volatile time. So if I went and bought that business for $125,000, but I knew how to make it worth $250,000 the next day, but I borrowed the $125,000, I wouldn't have debt when I buy it. I'd have $125,000 of equity, even though I borrowed money. And this is the misnomer where most people go, oh, you got to avoid debt. Yes, avoid debt, but you got to know what debt is to avoid it. If you don't know what it is, and you think it's every time you borrow money, it might prevent you from growth. So cash flow is the income statement. How can we use our assets to create income on a regular basis? The second way we can do that is in our business. Let's
just pause for a second. So I drew this as kind of what you were saying about, some of the things that, like, what we're taught is to have this where it only pays out at the end.
Yep.
Versus assets that keep paying out throughout of our lifetime. And so liabilities may be the gateway to assets. So let's just stop for a second and let's give some like practical examples of what so we use the example of buying the company, right? Yep. So this could be like chiropractors, this could be buying another practice, right? That how to operate a practice successfully. So maybe you have to take out $100,000 loan to buy the practice. However, the practice throws off, or the practice has $250,000 worth of revenue. So even though you may have that $100,000 debt, you're going to get $250,000 because you have knowledge and experience in order to turn that income, that $100,000 into $250,000, right? Yep. Okay. So Garrett, let's talk about this in terms of personnel, of adding on, because we're also talking about hiring your A team. So if I bring on an associate, it's going to cost me, let's say $60,000.
Yep.
So I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I can't afford that. I can't afford that. I can't afford that. So let's take this concept of, like debt, but it turns into money.
Okay. So let's look back at the income statement, income versus expense. Okay. And what we've got to do is break down that just because it's an expense, there's different types of expenses. Let's categorize them in 4 ways. Okay. The first type of expense is a destructive expense. If you got a B teamer or less, they might be more destructive than they are productive. An F, teamer, they're going to be toxic for the culture. So that's a destructive expense. You've got someone that actually costs your business money. There's lifestyle expenses. Lifestyle expenses are simply the things that you enjoy in life, and it gives you a quality of life along the way. Just pay cash for those. The third type of expense is a protective expense. This is, everything from buying insurance to transfer risk, to setting up the right corporations, to having enough safety and security through some liquid savings to handle, different surprises that come your way. But protective expenses help you to weather the storm. But the fourth type of expense is a productive expense. So what if I hire an associate for $60,000, but the reality is, after expenses, I make another $60,000 above what I paid them. That's a productive expense. You put in $1 and $2 come out.
So if you guys can see it, we've got destructive, lifestyle, protective, and productive.
Yep. And so most people think all expenses are bad and we need to eliminate them. That creates a budgetary reductionist scarcity mindset. And you can't save yourself rich. You can't save yourself wealthy because you're not being productive. You're not being an investor. You're thinking about what you can eliminate versus what you can create. And the wealthy create. The middle class eliminate. And they just get by through hard work and grit and effort, not through expansion and value creation.
So you'll never shrink your way to wealth.
Nope.
Like save. I don't want to spend. I don't want to spend. And we see that commonly in practices, right? Like, I don't want to take on the expense of an associate or a CA or have independent contractors. I'm a big fan of, like my husband always says, you chiropractors, like you have these businesses and you're only there 30 hours a week and yet you're paying for them 24/7. Why not have others who come in and use your space, and they don't even have to be chiropractors? Like, start thinking of, how do I leverage my assets, right? Like that whole cash flow thing. So can we talk about that for a second? And then we'll go to point 2 that we were originally discussing, is what ideas have you guys seen at the Wealth Factory of where chiropractors are taking their practices and generating more income, generating more cash flow so now it's not a liability, it's an asset.
We've had chiropractors that allow other chiropractors to shadow them for a fee. So they come and see how they actually do their reported findings, see how they do their dinner talks, see how their CAs operate with them, see how they handle the volume that they have. So that's, I used to do that for financial advisors. I've seen that. I've seen where they'll host CE events and they'll just set up chairs in their office and rent that out, even to dentists and stuff like that, because the space is there and they have to host those kind of things. So it builds relationships in the community and it gives them a rental fee. Obviously just getting associates is one that you've already mentioned and can easily happen as well. So, if you look at Well Factory, you came to our workshop, we host it in our headquarters, right? We transform the headquarters, put seats, and then everybody gets to see where we actually operate and be part of it. We used to go to hotels, they suck. They're like the ones that in Utah were dingy. They were dark. The sound sucked. We didn't have control over the AV. Now we're like, let's just host it here. We got great lighting. We got a beautiful building, a big atrium. And it's like that we just found a way to actually save money and produce more at the same time. Because now we have conference rooms for meetings and all that kind of stuff. So, there's so much opportunity when it comes to all of this. It's just a matter of, really taking it into consideration. Like, what can you do to maximize value? That's the question you have to ask. What can I do to maximize value? If your question is, what can I do to minimize cost? You'll minimize value. If you start thinking, what can I do to maximize value? You'll start expanding, and that's where wealth is built.
Nice. I love that. All right. So point 2 that I had interrupted you on, do you remember what? So we were talking about assets, liability, the difference between assets, and you were just getting ready to go to point.
The second way that you create cash flow. The first was getting your assets to create cash flow. The second is to get your business to create recurring revenue that isn't your direct involvement. When you're table side, that's direct involvement. When you're not table side and there's still income coming in, that's entrepreneurial based income. The great book that Robert Kiyosaki wrote on Cash Flow Quadrant, talking about moving from an employee to moving to being self-employed. A lot of chiropractors are self-employed, meaning when they're gone, so is the income. When you can move to a business owner where you've got an organization, you've got the right processes, people, and automated procedures that allow you to leave and still have income come in, that is what you're doing to create cash flow. It's utilizing people, not just assets. So that's the second way to create cash flow and recurring income.
So is the other way to look at that, Garrett, is instead of trading time for money?
Yeah, and look, it's like when I was early on in my career, I had read E-Myth, I had heard work on your business, not in your business, and I intellectually got it, but emotionally couldn't connect because every time I was working on my business, it felt like I wasn't making money. There's a pretty renowned chiropractor, someone that I've seen that a lot of people know, missed a call with me because he said he had an emergency at the office, an emergency patient. I said, shit, I didn't know that you were actually an emergency room doctor. And he goes, well, no, I'm not. Someone came in. I'm like, oh. You knew that was immediate income and you canceled. You just missed a call with me because I wasn't writing you a check. I'm like, it's pretty short-sighted because I think what I could teach in 20 minutes would be infinitely more than any patient is ever going to pay. But see, that's someone who's stuck in their business because it's time for money, it's activity and busyness. And ultimately, it takes a shift to start thinking like a business owner. It's a different skill set. It's a different muscle. And it requires like a resistance of like, okay, I'm going to my old habits of what I know I can do to make money to have new habits that might take a little bit longer or might have some expense along the way, but create more opportunity for growth. And here's why it's important to work on your business is because you get to define what you want to do moving forward. When we work in your business, your patients and your team define what you're going to do moving forward. That's a major distinction. And ultimately, if you don't create that context and you don't take that time, like the way that I finally got it, we're having a technology meltdown, like, 10 years ago. I was on the road. I couldn't get my email. There's all these issues going on. Dan McCoy, probably had to fly in and save me or something. But I was starting to melt down and I was talking to one of my mentors and he was like, hey, do you think that if any of Warren Buffett's companies has a technology issue today that he even knows about it? Or that if he showed up to the office, they would start complaining about it? Or do you think that they would just be excited to see him and feel like, he's like, you're just a business runner you're not really a business owner. He says, because when you're gone, so is the business. Like, so I just sat down, Barbara, and I was like, what do I want to do with a week? I want to be teaching. I want to be on video. I want to be creating content. I want to be writing. I want to be a thought leader that is changing the financial game during my lifetime. And guess what? I can't do that if I'm stuck meeting with someone with processes and I'm in admin and I'm dealing with sales, because that's all in the business, right? But when I could delegate that to Brandon Allen, right? And Brandon runs the operations, or I can delegate all my marketing to my CMO and he runs it and owns it like it's his own business. I can truly have the freedom to be a thought leader. And the only time I'm even working on the business now is with vision, not with admin. And vision is the rarest commodity for business owners today. Most business owners' vision is pay the bills, get enough patients, and that's not a vision. That's a job. And so we really got to get clear. Do we have a job, and is that the job that we want? And are we doing the things that we think are representative of who we can be at our highest level? And I think most of our calendars would say no. Or if I watched from afar, I'd be like, really? That's what you want to do with your day? And look, I'm not saying it's easy. It's a difficult transition, but anything worth it typically has some hard along the way, right? Like, it was hard to write my first book. It was hard to get my marriage to an extraordinary level. It's hard to raise kids. My son just turned 14 this morning, by the way. So
congratulations.
he's taller than everybody but me. I told him when he's taller than me, I'm going to wrestle him every day with my old man strength to show him who's in charge.
My old man strength. That's right. And ask him not to break your bones or your brittle bones or something. That's awesome. I love that. And listen, everyone, like, when you hear these concepts, Garrett isn't saying like, throw away your business, never show up and adjust again. That's not what he's saying at all. It's like, start building them into your life, right? So maybe right now you only are like, and Rich and I were going over this yesterday. So Rich Christensen, so Matthew Loop introduced me to Garrett. Garrett introduced me to Rich Christensen, and I coach with Rich. And we were talking about the importance of Power Hour, right? Producer Power Hour, and how important it is to start the day and just be thinking about, all right, what questions, and so much of our day is formed by what questions do we start asking ourselves in the morning? Like, is the first question going to be like, oh my gosh, what kind of problems am I going to have to deal with? Right? Like, that's going to set the tone for your day, versus if we start by, and Rich said the first thing he always does is wiggles his toes, because then it grounds his entire being. And to start by vision, like, even if all you do from this conversation that Garrett and I are having right now is you start setting aside 10 minutes a week, which is 100% improvement probably from last week, and start thinking, all right, how can I be the visionary of my practice? And what do I want to do with my week? What are my most favorite ways to add value? Now, maybe you're not adding value to the world by writing and educating and speaking and being a thought leader. In what ways do you want to add value? Maybe it's you're phenomenal at your trade. Well, like Garrett said, bring in other chiropractors to follow you, to shadow you, to pass on your legacy. Are there parts of what you do every day that you could teach somebody else in order to you be freed up to do more of the high level stuff? So, I think it's so easy to hear these kind of conversations and to feel like, oh, well, I can't do that. I still have to show up and adjust every day, and I still have to manage my business. That's fine. Just start taking out small slices to implement what we're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, like, I didn't give up coaching. I just redefined what coaching was for me. Like, because like you said, you don't have to give up adjusting. It's just that my coaching was I spend a full day with you, Barbara. We do a full immersion versus like me meeting on a weekly basis or taking you through financial processes that my team can handle or even do better than me. So you just want to start defining, like, that's what is just really like a strange phenomenon to me, is we get a chance to build the model that we want, and yet so many people say they're too busy to do that. And I'm like, wait. You have the choice to do what you want to do. Now, you may say, well, I have to pay the bills or, whatever it is. But I just thought the other day, I just wrote in my journal, I was like, what are the easiest ways for people to get out of the busyness trap? Because so many people are I'm too busy. Like, I had too much time yesterday to start my day because I've left the busyness trap. So, you know what I did? I picked up my guitar and started playing my guitar. Like, I just, you know, I was like, that was cool. Like, I got to re-engage with my hobby. But when you're in the busyness trap, here's what I do to eliminate the busyness trap. I don't answer 2 of 3 of my email accounts because I don't have control over everybody that emails me, but I do have control pretty well over who texts me. So I answer through text, not through email, because I don't want all these avenues that people get to infringe upon my life that I may not choose. You can shorten the meeting times that you have if you have regular meetings. You can make your regular meetings less frequent. You could eliminate meetings that aren't that productive and delegate them to someone else that might make them more productive. So now I film a half a day on Mondays where I used to do all meetings all day on Mondays. So now I've only got half the amount of meetings, so I can now be a thought leader, right? There's like, those are just 4 of the things I wrote down. I wrote down a full page. If you're too busy, you're not prioritizing. If you're too busy, you're getting stuck into things that aren't the best version of who you are. Like on Tuesday, all I did was write. I wrote more on Tuesday than I've written in any other day of my life. I wrote copy. I wrote part of my book. I wrote 4 articles. I revised. You know, it's like when you create that space that you don't have all this interference and you don't have all these people that can tug at you. Now I can choose when am I going to go on and respond to people. If I go to social media, it's on my terms, right? Not letting everyone else dictate your terms. So you have the pen. What do you want to author in your life? And what are you going to start giving up to do the things that allow you to be more productive, be a better investor, grow your business, improve your quality of life? Like, you get to choose.
And, you know, I think it honors other people when we also step out of doing busyness, right? Because then somebody else can step up from what they're doing. You know, like Garrett mentioned, respond to emails. And I'm sure some people, like, their mind went to, yeah, but my team doesn't know how to answer all the questions. Okay, can they possibly
I just have a meeting with them once a week and we cover the ones they don't know how to answer. There's the solution, right?
There you go. And make a checklist. Like, there's really not that many new things that show up. There are new people that ask the same question that you've already answered, but there really aren't that many new questions that come up, right? Because most people aren't thinking on a higher level. So they're thinking the same way as everybody else. So in your community docs, people are probably having the same questions that everyone else has had. So create systems to answer those so that you don't feel like you're chained to answer those. Like, you know, your top 10 questions answered, have it in written form, have it on your website, have it as a video, do a Facebook Live, like answer those things that keep coming up in your life to free you up from having to answer it, and step out of that and give somebody else the pleasure of now stepping into something that they weren't even doing before. You know, so much of our busyness is tied to fear, and you know, Rich and I went through my own busyness that's tied to fear too. And when you step back and look at it, it's like, oh, well, now I see why I was doing it. So like, but if you don't take the time to at least evaluate it, you'll just keep doing the same thing over and over again. I want to make sure, I want to make sure that we answer the questions specifically that Jandy asked. So let me find them again, because of course my phone has gone through all kinds of.
Yeah, she asked if there was such thing as good debt. There's just efficient loans or inefficient loans. There's liabilities that access assets and liabilities that don't. You want to avoid borrowing to consume. You want to avoid having more that you owe than what you have. Those are debts, and all debts are going to be detrimental. Equity is a good thing, and you may borrow to get that equity, so it's not always bad to owe money. She wants to know, is it more important to like pay something off and pay off loans, or to invest? So there's a couple of things here. Everyone needs to know their cost of money, which is what rate of return can they earn on their money in a long-term sustainable way. So their best after expense rate of return, what is that? It's different for everyone. And when you know that number, you can compare that to the loans that you're paying. See, if you're only earning 3% on something and you're paying 5% on your loans, cash that sucker out, pay that off. That's going to be a much better situation for you. But really, the best way I know to pay off loans is use your cash flow index, which is you take your loan balance of every loan and you divide it by its minimum monthly payment. Loan balance divided by minimum monthly payment, it spits out a number. The smaller that number, the less efficient the loan. Loan balance divided by minimum monthly payment, and you only want to pay extra to one loan at a time. pay the minimum to every other loan that you have, and pay extra to the one with the lowest cash flow index. That's going to help you out. So know your cost of money so you know whether you really should pay something off. Know whether it impacts your peace of mind. If loans are starting to keep you up at night, then it's worth paying those things off because you're your greatest asset and you don't want to actually be derailed or distracted because of this concern and worry or be dragged into scarcity. And then, but also I have a loan on my home. One, because I don't plan on staying here for the rest of my life. And two, because I can earn a higher interest guaranteed than I can pay on this. And I have enough money to pay the loan off if I want. I just want to have plenty of money for when the recession hits because people are going to have this real big hit on their cash flow during that time. And they're going to sell their assets at a much lower rate. So I can make money on the buy to bail them out. So I will happily bail them out. I'm hoping to bail them out right now with knowledge, but those that don't get the knowledge, I will bail some people out with cash because I can be extraordinarily profitable during that time. But you got to look at your own situation. Do you have peace of mind behind it? What other assets do you have? And then, really, I believe in the 3 R's. Restructure. You can restructure loans to improve your cash flow index. That's through like refinancing. You can renegotiate interest rates because you can pay less. So that would help you out in getting there quicker. And then you can reallocate, which is you can find underperforming assets and you can pay off higher interest rate loans because that's a guaranteed return. So that's kind of an overall answer to her question.
Awesome. Restructure, renegotiate, and reallocate. So I think
alliterate. You should always use alliteration in teaching. I've just decided. I love alliteration. I always go like the 3 R's and the 4 I's and
right.
Protect and perpetuate or whatever,
all the acronyms.
Yeah.
And I don't remember if I learned this, who knows, from you in some capacity. The idea of, and actually, you know what, I think maybe even Brandon was talking about it at the workshop about how when we have things going on in our mind all the time and we're churning and churning and churning and churning, that has such a huge impact on our production, our ability to actually like have clarity and to be able to be a visionary, right? Because our mind is always churning on this other thing. So let's talk about, I'm glad that you brought that up. Like if you have debt that's keeping you up at night, do something about it. All right. So let's talk about in practical terms. So I'm a chiropractor. I've been in practice about 5 years. I have a massive student loan. I probably have a business loan. I have overhead. I have small children. I'm in the mindset of I've got to put away for their college. I've got to do all of these things. I'm not sleeping at night.
Yeah.
How do we address that situation?
Well, if you're not sleeping at night, then it's probably because scarcity is starting to plague and invade on you. So I'm going to go with something that at first will feel counterintuitive, but stick with it. I call it the 90-day debt delay. For 90 days, you're only going to pay the minimum to every loan that you have. And the extra that you were paying to any of your loans, you're going to invest it in yourself. You're going to increase the skill set. You're going to put it somewhere in your business to free up time. You're going to do something to break through the shackles of scarcity to embrace production. Then after 90 days, with that increased production, you can go attack those loans, right? You can really go after those loans more aggressively because there's going to be more cash coming in. And so if you're staying up at night, then worry festers and creates even more scarcity. So the key is going to be simplifying and producing. So you just tackle it like what in the next 90 days are the 5 things you're going to do to be more productive. And rather than thinking about shrinking and eliminating and the student loan that feels like a weight on your shoulders, you're just going to focus as if like, what can I personally do to increase skills, production, and value? And you're just going to grow during that time. And so if you end up losing sleep, that's time to get up and recite your vision. That's time to get up and refine your vision. That's time to really think about the actions you'll take because action destroys scarcity. Worry embraces it. And we've got to get into action.
I love that. Action cures fear, right? So like, that's my rule. If I'm like processing things and I can't sleep, like, just get up, because I'm not accomplishing anything and it's not getting better. It's just that scarcity monster, that worry gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So I want to make a comment about this 90-day thing. And I think that that is such a brilliant strategy. All right. So for 90 days, put it in the parking lot, like Rich talks about, right? ABC parking lot. Just put it in the parking lot, pay the minimum so that it's not dinging your credit. Just like know that you're taking care of it. Get into momentum. Get into momentum. Not just busyness, right? Because we already discussed busyness and that's not going to solve the challenge. So what's the first thing that Garrett said? Like, number one, pay the minimums. So you have to know what those are. Call up, like, grab your however you pay your bills, if it's your checking account, automatic, whatever, look and see what each of those are. What is my minimum? Set that amount, right? Then the next thing he said, invest in yourself. Because if you knew how to do it, you would have already done it. You clearly need help, which is totally fine. I know I've always had a personal coach. What about you, Garrett? Like, do you just fly by the seat of your pants, or do you have mentors who are there to guide you along the journey?
Yeah, now I feel like I've got a lot of peers, but for a long time, like, I went through strategic coach with Dan Sullivan, hired a guy one-on-one, Rick Sapio. I've just gone to so many things, and I'm always in a mastermind. I just spent 5 days at MIT's alumni house with the Gathering of the Titans. I attended the entire thing as a student, even though I was speaking there. So absolutely, if you're not learning, it's going to be so much more painful in the future. And when I say the future, like right now, because things are moving so much quicker, because it's not the old days where you could learn one trick and then ride that out for the rest of your life. Like, that doesn't work. The world's evolving. You've got to be part of that learning along the way.
Absolutely. So Dr. Jennifer is in the boot camp, and she bought the program that you and I were offering.
Curriculum for Wealth, yeah.
And so she just said, this 90-day strategy helped me so much to start off the year right. And my quarter 1 has been great. Congratulations.
Awesome. Glad to hear that, Jennifer.
Jen, instead of like thinking about it, she's like, I'm taking action. Like, end the thinking and please just act. And you can find out more at wealthfactory.com. Wealthfactory.com. I had a crawler going. Let me just find it again so everyone can see it. All right. So Garrett, as we wind this down, what action step can somebody take now in order to find out more about Wealth Factory or to have a deeper understanding? I also want to just 1 second.
So wealthfactory.com, she's mentioned that, and she's grabbing something right now. But look, the key is you've got to really get clear about the difference between an investor and a saver, because savers fund the institutions and investors grow wealth. And it's very different. Like, it's important to save automatically, and it's important to have liquidity, but not to have that saver's mindset for your entire life, where it's all about what you stand to lose and scarcity being the governance and cutting everything back and living a life where you spend most of your time saving on transactions rather than growing something. Like, I don't mind if I pay too much for something, because I'd rather pay too much than spend too much time saving money on something that was inconsequential in my life. And that's a mindset shift from where I grew up and how I was raised, and ultimately has given me a lot of freedom.
Absolutely. And I want to tell you something about Wealth Factory. So I'll like kind of tell on myself a little bit here. It's definitely intimidating. Money is, right? And at Wealth Factory, around all these super successful people that in your mind, they have everything figured out in their life, right? So it can be embarrassing to be like, well, like, this is like my financial status, or this is where I'm at. And I just want to tell you, everyone that I have met at Wealth Factory, and I think I've pretty much met everyone, they would much rather, just like in coaching, I would much rather you start, and we might as well start with the truth, because we're always going to end with it. Right. And so when I've bared things to them, no one's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe it. Instead, it's like, okay, cool. Like, this is where we're starting from, and here's where we're going to go. Like, it's the nicest group of people. And yeah, Garrett's a superstar. When you know him, like, he's no different than each one of us. And there were times in his life that he wasn't here, right? Like he didn't start out here. And in a couple minutes, I want to go through this, but I want to just share with everybody a couple of books that Wade suggested that my husband and I read to understand better infinite banking and insurance. And we'll have to have that conversation at a different Facebook Live, but this one as well. I don't know if you can see the title of it, but one is called How Privatized Banking Really Works by Carlos and Murphy, if you're taking notes today. And then the other one is Riveted by York and Howell. And shoot, I have one more, just a minute. And then this one, which this is the one I've been reading on airplanes. It's called Entrusted. And this is along the lines of obviously what you and Rich just did at the Legacy, which was, it was just 2 weeks ago, right? And this is Entrusted, Building a Legacy That Lasts by York and Howell. If you haven't read these books, I encourage you to pick them up. They'll continue training your mind in a different way about finances and leaving a legacy for your family. So Garrett, let's just real quickly talk about this myth concerning insurance. Yeah. Whether it's disability insurance or life insurance policies or infinite banking, or even like protecting our home, those kinds of things, because I was definitely in that camp. And I think especially after going to the workshop and you laying it out the way that you did. Oh, my dad's listening. Hey, Dad. Garrett and I say hey.
Great to see him. He came to the workshop with you. It was fun.
It was. All right, so let's talk about that.
Well, look, insurance, you brought it up before, and nobody hates insurance. We just hate paying for it. And we especially hate for paying for things that we don't feel like we're getting a benefit from or we don't understand. So when it comes to insurance, my whole objective is don't insure anything inconsequential. Inconsequential in my definition would be I could write a check for it today and still go to sleep tonight without feeling like I had a major loss, right? So anything inconsequential would be something breaks around the house, something like is stolen, from the house and it wasn't a big deal. Like those kind of things, a fender bender. Like those are stuff I just pay cash for because the first dollars of insurance that you insure are the most expensive because they're most likely to happen, but the least consequential. So really low deductibles, really short-term elimination periods before something kicks in. So insure only the catastrophic, not the inconsequential, so that you can transfer risk that matters. And what you're wanting to do is get a lot more than $1 of insurance for less than $1. If we insure things on our own, we spend at least $1 to insure that because it's our cash that might be locked away. If we use insurance companies, it's their gig, it's what they're good at. We hopefully can get pennies on the dollar. We spend pennies, we get dollars of insurance to protect our legacy, to protect our assets. So when it comes to insurance, I look to transfer the major risks, not the minor risks. And by doing that, I get a lot of coverage for a lot less money. Now, when it comes to certain insurances, there's certain things that we know are going to happen. We're going to die eventually. And even if somehow through artificial intelligence, you can upload your consciousness to a computer or some nonsense, like the bottom line is the insurance company considers you dead at 100 anyway, so you get your money. So I like to insure things that are certain to happen, especially. So life insurance, I have a lot of life insurance because that money's going to come in after my death. But knowing that that's going to happen, I can actually spend more money and I can get 20% more or 50% more cash flow off of my other assets when I get them to work together. Now, that's a big concept, so we'll just give them my book, What Would the Rockefellers Do, so they could dive into that on one of the chapters. But there's also other benefits that I can get cash value, and fair or not, insurance companies get preferential treatment over banks. Banks, you pay taxes, the interest rates are really low. Insurance cash values, if designed right, can get 400% or 800% better returns with less risk and no tax. So all we're doing is we're playing the political game that these somehow have political favor and we go benefit from them. And you can access that money along the way before 59 and a half. And you can use it if there's other great opportunities that come for your business or buying something. And if the market goes down, your money doesn't go down. So that's kind of, my take on the life insurance in a very short period of time.
So I thought it was really interesting. And again, I'm not sure if this is from the workshop and what I'm talking about when I say the workshop is that my dad and I went to the Wealth Factory, I think it was in January, and it was all day Thursday, all day Friday, and pretty much the whole day on Saturday. And so you got to hear primarily from Garrett, but also other members of his team, like Brandon talked about scaling a business, and Tim and Wade, and I don't remember everyone who spoke, but you're there together and you're just learning, and like tons of, like, you can ask questions, like the whole team is standing around to answer your questions. It's a small environment. It's not like, what were there, 48?
Yeah, we limit to 54 people. So typically it's 54 or less. And
so you really get to just get majorly indoctrinated and learn a whole bunch. So I encourage you, if you're at that, if contact the Wealth Factory. That's all I can say about it. But one of the things that Garrett brought up was this whole idea of not insuring your home, or self-insuring, right? And to think that, all right, if your home is worth, let's say, $500,000, and if you self-insure it, that means that you have $500,000 sitting somewhere in case something happens to your home. Well, you haven't really done. You take it, like you're the expert on that. Like, how is that so nonsense? Because when you explained it was like, oh, duh.
Yeah, so I just barely typed in the way that they can get my book at no charge. So imagine that you pay off your mortgage and you have this home. When there's no mortgage, you're not required to have homeowners insurance. But even if it's $1 million home, that insurance is probably only $2,500 a year, max, right? That would be an expensive policy. Well, if you don't have the policy, you've got to have enough cash set aside that if something happens, you could replace that home. Otherwise, you're fully exposed, probably going to be worried about everything. So if you do that, you can't go invest that in your business because that might take time to pay off. It has to be fairly locked away. Now you're saving $2,500 by not having the insurance, but you're costing yourself a lot more than $2,500 by locking away your money. Because what interest rate does it take off $1 million to overcome $2,500 a year?
Right.
Not much, right? Even if you got 1% on that, it's $10,000. But if you now have to have that in a savings account, if you now have to have that somewhere where it can't be allocated, that's the problem, is we save pennies and lose dollars with that level of thinking. Where if I have the insurance, I have full permission to use that $1 million. It's a permission slip. I can go invest that. I can go grow that. And if something happens to my home, the insurance company is going to rebuild that home. If someone sues me, I'm going to have liability protection that I wouldn't have had. It'll be the homeowner's company that actually hires the attorneys, not me personally. So there's so many benefits that you get with that by simply having that insurance. Not having it puts your assets at risk and it locks away your cash.
Yeah, absolutely. And then your insurance too, you have your team. Like Garrett said, if you get sued, well, there's your insurance, like their experts are going to cover you. And that's another thing I love about the Wealth Factory is when you become a client, you get access to their accredited network. So these are individuals that have the same lens as the Wealth Factory does for your economic health, basically now and in the future, right? That you'll have financial independence, that creating individuals who have financial independence. And so the accredited network of accountants, that's the lens that they're looking at for you for the future, is financial independence. The attorneys, they're looking at your legal situation through the same lens, financial independence. The financial planners, the same lens. So everyone has the same objective. It's not like, well, this person's trying to do this and this person's trying to do that. And the cool thing is that Garrett has personally gone through the process of making sure these individuals are going to have the same alignment and philosophies and paradigms as a Wealth Factory. And for me, that gives me so much more confidence because I don't know how to read about all of the small print in insurance. And quite frankly, I don't want to learn how, but I trust the accredited network because I trust the Wealth Factory. And so that just that makes life a lot easier and less stressful in order to put myself into that position of financial independence. So Garrett, any last minute words before we sign off?
Let's see.
What song were you playing on your guitar this morning?
What songs?
Yeah.
I played 3 songs. I played Feel Like Making Love by Bad Company. I played Stairway to Heaven, which I know that's like that's the joke from Wayne's World, from Led Zeppelin, and I played Bad Moon Rising. I'm just learning 20
Nice.
So I'm just learning 20 campfire songs that anyone could sing to, as I'm up at my cabin all summer. And
that's awesome. That's a great playlist just right there.
Yeah. Tomorrow I'm gonna start working on Sweet Home Alabama next. I've been working on it a little bit. I got some work to do there. So yeah. Africa. I'm gonna learn the song Africa. That'll be by Toto. That'll be fun. Yeah. Stand By Me, Brown Eyed Girl. I got a good list of them.
Oh, nice. Very, very cool. Speaking of Brown Eyed Girl, I remember at Michigan State, Marcy Soundcrown, I'm sure you're not watching this, but if you were, we would laugh at it. So at Michigan State, the band that we all used to always go listen to was called Groove Spoon. And they were playing Brown Eyed Girl, and they had handed out maracas. And so she was playing the maracas, and she's like, wouldn't it be cool to steal them? She perhaps had too many shark bowls because we were at the Land Shark that night. And she runs out with them. And one of the band members runs after her, and she's like, look, they're chasing me. So she was pretty proud of herself. There, you can remember that little story about Brown Eyed Girl. So please, everyone who's watching, reach out to wealthfactory.com. Our contact there is David Gowans. Amazing, amazing human being. But anyone, the person who most likely answer the phone is Trish, and that is Garrett's sister, and she's super cool. So please, please, please take action. If you have specific questions about my experience with Wealth Factory, I think I've done a pretty good job explaining it during this Facebook Live. But if you'd like to know more, please do reach out to me. I am so incredibly grateful for my friendship with Garrett and the relationship that I've established with all of you. So thank you.
Hey, that was fun, Barbara. Way to break everything down and draw things out.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, you have a wonderful day. God bless your family this weekend as you celebrate Easter, and I'll catch you on the flip side.
All right, take care.
See ya.